Instagram is doing well.
Hey guys, it's Matt Elephant, the customer happiness specialist, back at another Ask Lee. Lee, what's up, man? How you doing?
Hi, Matt. I'm great, thanks. I'm looking forward to today's fall event. There are lots of dad jokes around. We'll have everybody falling over by the end of the session.
Lots of fall jokes for sure. Awesome, dude. Yeah, so tonight's topic is all about fall comfort. And Lee, what are your kind of initial intro thoughts to just fall comfort in relation to mushrooms and beyond?
Just before I get started, I need to make my usual disclaimer that we're not offering medical advice, and we're not treating or curing any people's diseases or any such things. And this information is just for your educational purposes only. So I think fall is a really interesting time of the year. I think, for a lot of people, there's the issues around getting the immune system ready for the inevitable challenges that happen during winter months. There's, for those that are living in climates where there's just not as much sunlight. Like I lived in Wisconsin for quite a few years in the early 2000s, and the lack of sunlight was like a real challenge. So there's an interesting discussion around vitamin D from that point of view. But it's always a great time to talk about mushrooms. There's always something, that's applicable to the various times of the year.
Right on.
So we got a lot of questions lined up.
Yeah, we got a lot. I just wanted to ask something. You mentioned Wisconsin. How was that experience, and just the short months in the winter and stuff like that?
I moved my young family, so my wife and I were 40 at the time, and we had young kids. Yeah. My son was just 3, and my daughter was 7, and it was a really big upheaval. And the first year was kind of hellish. I was working a lot in a new environment, a new world, but we lived there for 7 years, and every year got better and better. By year 4 or 5, it was our home. We loved it. We had great friends, and life was just fantastic. And we were all really sad to leave and to say goodbye. It was a really difficult time. But in terms of the winter, like, holy hell, like, dealing with the cold. In Australia, we're blessed by not having to have such climatic extremes, but we all got adapted to that, and you get the clothing, and you embrace the cold. I started cross-country skiing. I'd ride my bike outside. I had a cutoff of 25 Fahrenheit. I couldn't go any colder than that. So I'd do, if the roads were clear, I'd get out and ride. But cross-country skiing, I learned how to ice skate. The kids had a fantastic time in the snow. But I guess the biggest of all of the challenges, and the one that we've touched on already, was just that seasonal affective disorder. And I didn't suffer from that, or my kids, but my wife, was really challenged by that. So, there's herbs, and supplements, and we use light therapy and that sort of thing. But there's always some challenge, when you're dealing with things.
Oh, I know. Totally. Yeah, I'm definitely not used to the time change. It's already the sun's already setting pretty much now. So it's just like not used to it yet, but.
Anyways. It wasn't light until 7:30 in the morning. Like that's just unheard of here in Australia.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. So, alrighty. So we'll jump into the first question of the day. And the first question is, with less sunlight available throughout the day during the fall and winter months, would vitamin D2 or D3 be more effective for supporting vitamin D levels?
Yeah, well, we already touched on that, hey? In the research, D2 and D3, across the major aspects of what vitamin D does, because, vitamin D's really important across literally thousands of different biological processes. But the majority of the major ones, D2 and D3, work quite well, but they do have some differences. So for people that don't want to use a D3 supplement because it comes from sheep lanolin, and there's industrial processes that that manufacture that stuff. That vitamin D2 is, if you weren't a chemist and you held a D2 and a D3 molecule like in your fingers, you wouldn't be kind of able to tell them apart. They're almost identical. So they're both effective, but the dosing is quite different around the different types of vitamin Ds. So D3 has got a greater affinity for the storage proteins that hold it in the body. So you can load up on D3. You could take a big bolus of it today and not need any for a month, for example. So with vitamin D2, however, it doesn't have that same binding affinity for the storage proteins. So you can't take a big bolus of it like you would with D3. So to get the best out of D2, it's recommended that you take, I tell my patients 1,000 international units a day because it's a nice, neat number. But when you read the research, it's the trials are conducted on numbers anywhere from 600 international units up to 1,000 international units. So with D2, it's better to do 1,000 international units every day, very regularly, so that you're always delivering the body, its requirements for what it needs, knowing that it doesn't get stored as effectively in that same way. So the Real Mushrooms D2 product, my recommendation for a dose on that is just 1 capsule a day.
Okay. What about would it be better to take it with like with a meal just to improve absorption, or what are your thoughts there?
I don't think that matters.
That matters.
I think that the big deal around when you take stuff is kind of compliance. If you put too much kind of challenge around remembering or creating a routine to do something, then you might not likely to be as regular as you should be. And if you're choosing to use D2, which is a really, excellent choice, then you really need to do it every day. So I think meal times is the easiest to remember to do it. So pick a meal where you're always going to be very regular. So for some people, let's say the breakfast, always do your supplements at breakfast. If you're doing twice a day dosing, then breakfast and dinner makes sense. But not everybody has a meal at the same time or in the same location. So, often breakfast is a more straightforward, but it doesn't really matter, whatever suits your routine and your lifestyle.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, another question I have is, what about certain foods as far as being good sources of vitamin D? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, that's challenging. So, like cod liver oil, is the age old, kind of, remedy for that. But I think people are choosing D2 because they're vegan, vegetarian, or there's a preference to not use a highly processed manufactured product that's been transformed by industrial processes. So the other source is mushrooms. So you can slice your mushrooms up and put them in the sun and make your own vitamin D. But I tried that, and I don't have the stamina to have a routine that would allow me to do that, as often as I need to do it to get the vitamin D. So it's probably better just to take a supplement where you got that known 1,000 international units every time, and put your efforts and energies into making kombucha or like making sourdough bread or something that might have more value. I
Gotcha. Awesome, man. All righty, go on to the next question here. Next question is, with fall upon us, my shoulder, knees, and even finger joints bother me. I'm wondering, is there any type of mushroom that can assist with it? I'm currently taking Reishi, 5 Defenders, Cordyceps, and Lion's Mane.
Well, yeah, you're not alone with that issue, and there probably aren't any more mushrooms to take if you're doing those ones.
We got it covered.
Um,
Yeah.
so full marks for ticking all the boxes there. It's hard for me as a clinician to make recommendations, to the public that don't have access to the same kind of remedies that I do. But in clinic, I find that celery seed extract works really, really well for those kind of fall joint type problems. It's very hard to find a good quality celery seed extract, and not all celery seed is the same. So celery seed that's used in the food industry to create flavor in stocks and things doesn't have the right medicinal properties. So the celery seeds that are medicinal come from India, typically from the Punjab, and they're incredibly bitter and very pungent. So if you can find yourself a good source of celery seeds, then that in my experience, that's kind of like a home run every time.
Yeah.
Juicing celery became really popular for a while. There was a guy an influencer called the Medical Medium that was really big into juicing with celery. But celery itself, like the stalks of celery, are very low in those chemical elements that have that anti-inflammatory effect.
Interesting. Never heard of celery extract. That's cool. What about like
red light
frankincense?
therapy? Sorry, red light therapy might be another thing that's easier to kind of access, and there's some good evidence around that. Sorry, Matt, you were going to ask me something?
I was just curious about what about like boswellia extract, frankincense for kind of joints?
Yeah, I go there when the celery seed doesn't work. When the complaint is it happens in fall, and the quality issues around boswellia are really quite challenging as well. Not all boswellia is created the same, and you'd never know just from looking at the label. I've spent 35 years in the herbal, industry, and now the mushroom industry, and quality is always, one of the biggest kind of sticking points. But boswellia, devil's claw, highly bioavailable curcumin, ginger, fresh grated ginger every day, might give you some relief, and that's relatively easy to do because you can just buy the fresh ginger at the store. And like a 2 to 4 grams a day, might be a place to start.
What about ginger tea? Would that be as effective, or would that be a little more diluted, you'd say? Or
to be a bit more diluted, I think the fresh ginger would be the way to go. Yeah.
Way to go. Cool. Alrighty. Let's see here. Go on to the next question.
Hope that helps.
Yeah, hopefully that helps there. All right, next question is, what mushrooms would be good for priming and prepping for the immune system during the colder months?
Oh, we saw the answer to that question on the previous question. Just do them all.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I'm being flippant, but I'm being serious at the same time. I don't think it really matters. I think that as a human, our body is naturally designed to do well under the instructional messages that mushrooms give us. So all of the mushrooms have got a unique angle on how they support the immune system, and I think the best solution is to do as many mushrooms as possible. So the picture that the mushrooms create in terms of the immune system support is as complete as possible. So we talk about the immune system as if it's this simple thing, where you can just kind of put your finger on it and say that's it. But it's just wickedly complicated. No, we know a lot about it, but at the nuances and at the cutting edge of science, there's still a huge amount that we don't know. So I think that 5 Defenders is, if you just want one product, 5 Defenders at an elevated serving size. So it says 2 capsules a day on the package. In preparation for winter, I would do an elevated serving size. So I'd do 4 or even 6 for at least a month, just to kind of ramp up the benefit that the immune system would get, and then back off and then stay with that lower dose. The trick with the immune system is, particularly during winter, is to be very vigilant. And at the first sign of challenges, you take evasive action and step up a notch. So with mushrooms, though, the preparation is the most important part, and because the effects aren't acute like you can get with some herbs. So in an acute setting, in clinic, I rely a lot on herbs like andrographis, the standardized andrographolide, holy basil, pelargonium, echinacea angustifolia, or purpurea root that's got the right levels of alkalamide. So the mushrooms are the foundation, and then those other herbs happen acutely. And some of those herbs are expensive, so that makes kind of economic sense as well. And there was a paper published earlier this year. There's quite a lot of papers on this topic, but this is just one of the more recent ones, where in a hospital setting they had a large number of patients. I've forgotten the number now, but it's like 10,000. It's a big number. And they did a stool screening of patients, and that would allow you to get into the study. And then they followed you over a period of years, and then they did a stool sample at the end. And what they found was that there was an incredibly high significance around reduced infections that are significant enough to put you in hospital in people that have got very high levels of butyrate producing bacteria. So the more butyrate producing bacteria you have, the less serious infections you get of all types. So we're not just talking about fall infections here, but what happens in other parts of your body, in terms of the infective processes. So mushrooms are really good at improving the butyrate producing bacteria in the gut. And I have been noticing in myself and in my patients and in the people that I've been teaching that over the course of 2, 3, 4 years, there's a robustness that gets built into the immune system as a result of the very slow and steady changes that take place in the gastrointestinal tract. So it's not just about what's happening at the coalface of the immune system, like, receptors and white blood cells and immune tissues, but a lot of the processes get guided by the gut. So, if we're not successful this fall, if we stay with the mushrooms, like next fall will be a bit better than this one, and then the subsequent one will be a little bit better. So we're talking about a lifestyle change that carries you through your whole life, not just the one event.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is butyrate the same thing as like short chain fatty acid? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. Thanks for picking me up on that. So the bowel flora takes soluble fibers and they convert them into short chain fatty acids. So there's butyrate, acetate, propionate. There's a couple of other ones that are more minor, and then a whole lot of more smaller volatile organic molecules that aren't very well understood. And butyrate, propionate, and acetate all have got very highly significant roles that they play in maintaining the health of the body in different locations. So butyrate is the one that's most highly associated with these immunological effects. It does a lot of things that we don't need to go into now, but so that's why drinking apple cider vinegar is so good for you, because it's very high in the acetate, short chain fatty acids. So if your body's not making enough of those, drinking some apple cider vinegar replaces that. There's supplements now that are butyric acid, but they don't taste that great. And it's way better to make your own, because it's easy to have a reductionist way of thinking and to say, butyrate's where it's all at. But, the bacteria in our gut are really complicated. There's a whole lot of other molecules that get produced as well. So it's much better to upregulate the bacteria that are meant to be there than just supplement, like a nutrient.
Yeah, very, very true. So, alrighty, we will go to some of the comments here. And so Sarah Adams asks, what mushrooms might help with upper right GI pain? Functional dyspepsia? Thank you.
Functional dyspepsia. Yeah.
There you
So
go.
the stomach has got bands of muscle around it. So there's vertical, horizontal, and oblique bands, and they all contract and move together. That's how the stomach has a churning motion to regulate and improve digestion. And then you've got sphincters involved that need to open and close to let the stuff from the stomach into the small intestine. So in terms of what mushrooms might help with that, I'm actually not sure. Mushrooms that might involve the nervous system, like lion's mane, might help. But with functional dyspepsia, for me, it's always a herbal, kind of solution. And I use herbs like, meadowsweet and ginger and cinnamon. Like the aromatic spices can be quite beneficial. So from a home remedy point of view, cinnamon, ginger, chamomile might help. It's a common issue, but there might also be a relationship with a certain amount of dysbiosis within the gastrointestinal tract as well. And then the lion's mane is a fantastic prebiotic. So whenever there's digestive things with lion's mane, the dose or the serving size is higher than the neurological dose. So from the traditional knowledge, the gastrointestinal doses kind of started around 5 grams of the dried herb. So somewhere in that vicinity might be worth trying, Sarah, to see if that could help.
Nice. What about like certain probiotics or any strands that might be supportive as well, do you think? Or
there could be, but there's been an explosion in that area of science, and there's a prebiotic for just about everything these days, and I can't keep up. So
it's
a lot of brands now position their probiotics, so there's one for dental health, there's one for pregnancy, there's one for IBS, there's one for constipation, one for antibiotic use. So maybe there's one for functional dyspepsia. I don't know.
Yeah. Gotcha. Awesome. All righty, we'll go back to the questions here. Kind of back to the sort of gut related. This next question, are there any particular mushrooms that help with candida?
Yeah, fascinating question. There's a lot of mythology that mushrooms make candida worse, and I think that mythology comes from just a misunderstanding of the chemistry of beta-glucans, where beta-glucans are glucose molecules all joined together, but candida yeast doesn't have the enzymatic machinery to break those molecules up to get access to that sugar. So I think possibly, when people say they've got candida, depending on the location, if it's gastrointestinal, then it's very often gets labeled as candida, but it's just generally a microbial infection, which is sensitive to various food stuff. So if you're eating, more sugary foods or freely accessible carbohydrates, it creates a dysbiosis imbalance, which creates those symptoms. In other locations, it's a little bit different. But I think in terms of educating the immune system and making it less reactive and improving the health of the microbiome in general, I think, all of the mushrooms would have a role to play. And maybe there isn't just one that would be the primary one. I think eating more mushrooms as part of your daily diet would help as well. And the mushrooms that have probably got more prebiotic action, although it's kind of splitting hairs, I think, I would put lion's mane, tremella, poria, pretty high up on the list of prebiotic mushrooms that could help resolve infections like that. But all of the mushrooms have got prebiotic action.
Yeah. Nice. What
Tough.
about what's that?
No, it's okay. Go on. I was going to
Okay.
say it's a difficult. That's a really difficult
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you think I feel like you get a lot of questions, or we do also in support, just about that taking mushrooms is going to make candida worse. Where do you think that statements kind of come from? Because you definitely see it surfacing to this day. Where do you think that kind of lies?
Yeah, well, as I was saying previously, I think the people that promoted that idea just didn't understand the science around, beta glucans in mushrooms are made up of glucose molecules, and therefore they could potentially be a glucose source. Mushrooms in general have got very, very low levels of free sugars. They're not sweet to the taste. So the yeast organism can't digest the sugars out of the beta glucan polymers. And it's exactly the opposite of that mushrooms will help candida, or will help gastrointestinal dysbiosis, because the beta glucans are feeding the beneficial bacteria, and when they have a good food source, they increase in their number. And if you starve the bad ones, in this case, say candida, by restricting sugar intake, then it will get out competed, and the natural antimicrobial peptides that get produced by the gut in response to the dietary elements and the bacterial messages that come from the community in the gut will naturally bring about a balance. But it's very hard to stamp out a myth, that's always kind of circulates.
Yeah.
We'll be talking about this, in another 10 years.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I was curious. So cool. Alrighty, going next question here. Please help me to understand AHCC and how one can mimic AHCC with your mushrooms.
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot. So let's just do a bit of a kind of maybe a science lesson around what AHCC, which stands for activated hexose correlated compound. I think that's what it is. And it comes from shiitake mycelium, and it's a very highly specific extract that has been fermented, and it's focused on the alpha glucans of the mycelium, and then it's concentrated and put into a product. So that's quite an elaborate process. So this activated hexose correlated compound is always much more expensive, and there's a little bit of clinical trial data to support it, but it supports the production of increasing numbers of natural killer cells, T cells, and it also helps to downregulate some cytokines. And there's a little bit of research around it, helping people that are having cancer treatments, to help them support their vitality and their general health while they're undergoing those programs. There's a little bit of research around it supporting patients with human papillomavirus, and there's also a little bit of research around it supporting liver health. So the fungal organism is in its entirety. So the mycelium is the body of the organism, and the mushroom is kind of like the reproductive structure, so the whole organism is made up of hyphae, and when you're looking at the mycelium and growing that in a liquid culture, the expression of the beta glucans and the alpha glucans on that surface of that surface of that organism, of the hyphae, is all about the evolutionary processes around that hyphae surviving in the environment. And fungi need to establish like a a life within a host. So sometimes it's dead wood, sometimes it's living wood, sometimes it's living insects. Sometimes it's an animal, sometimes it's a reptile. So on the surface of the hyphae, there's when they're grown in a liquid culture, there's this beta alpha glucan. When we always talk about beta glucans, alpha glucans kind of act like a camouflage. This is how I like to explain it. Kind of act like a camouflage that would allow the hyphae to infiltrate an organism without being detected by that organism's immune system. So when you extract those alpha glucans, and we always go on about alpha glucans being a measure of adulteration, because there's a group of starch alpha glucans that tell you, when you can measure those, it tells you that there's brown rice or oats or sorghum or some other kind of starchy kind of medium that's been used. But fungi all make what's called non-starch alpha glucans, and these are they're alpha glucans because of the arrangement, but they're not at all similar to what you would find in a grain, and their structures are quite different. And they're not bioavailable, and they're not water soluble. So you don't typically get them in water or ethanol based extracts. They just, if you've got the whole mushroom, you do get them. So this particular product has just focused in a very reductionist way just on those alpha glucans. So it's extracted them exclusively, and then it's fermented them to chop them up into smaller bits. And then when it's given at the right dose, you get those benefits that I talked about earlier. But so there's the background. So coming to the question, just about all mushrooms, play a role in improving natural killer cells and reducing cytokines. So you can get the same results with reishi or with the shiitake mushroom, or the reproductive structure or the fruiting body. And I think 5 Defenders would be a good choice if you're wanting to, get the benefits of something like AHCC without the extreme cost that's associated with that, because those products are significantly more expensive. And you could target, the area of interest that you've got. So as a general rule of thumb, if you're doing AHCC just as a general kind of immune thing, 5 Defenders would be a really kind of equal and much more cost-effective approach to take. But if you're having a very specific focus like the liver, you might choose reishi. Or if you've got HPV, then it might be reishi and turkey tail combined, for example. So I'm not a big fan of this reductionist view. It's got its place, but when the clinical data doesn't support a use case over what is a more traditional approach and a more affordable approach, and in that reductionist thinking, AHCC is only doing a very narrow slice of what it can do, because it's just one molecule. When you get the whole mushroom extract, it's very complex. You've got all of the various beta glucans, you've got all of the secondary metabolites, and all of the other stuff, which plays a key role in, like supporting the whole body's health, and not just like a narrow slice around that. Sorry, I just got distracted. Someone rang the doorbell. I'm thinking, no one should be ringing my doorbell at this time.
Oh yeah, you're good. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions just from what you kind of shared. So with this AHCC, is there any beta glucans in it at all, or is there none?
I don't
present?
think so. It's just all the non-starch alpha glucans that have been fermented into smaller bits to make them more bioavailable.
Okay. Would you say that it has, I guess, benefits or support for like glucose metabolisms? I've heard some studies, or just kind of, I guess, heard through the grapevine as far as taking maitake for just kind of blood sugar support. Would this fall in that same category, or would it be different?
I haven't seen any studies on blood glucose, and when there's blood glucose issues, I think maitake's got the best runs on the board. That's where I'd be
Okay.
going.
Yeah. Right on. Alrighty, go to the next question.
Yeah, it's a bit of a complicated topic, but it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I've definitely seen a few products, and it's definitely pricey, and it's definitely been kind of interesting. So cool. Alrighty, so the next question is, can one overdose on mushrooms?
Well, that's a loaded question, Hayes, because overdose means like you could have a dangerous kind of outcome, and within the bounds of like normal consumption, I think the answer is no. You probably can't.
Mm.
But if you went stupid, like if you took a whole bottle of reishi capsules, like you'd probably make yourself sick. You wouldn't harm yourself in a way that would be any permanent harm, but you might be sick for a couple of days. So you can certainly overdose on eating mushrooms, particularly mushrooms that are hard to digest. Like if you had a massive meal of, say, we call them king oyster mushrooms here. Don't know what you call them there. The big tall oyster mushrooms, they've got the really thick kind of stem. They've got a lot of chitin in them, so they're really hard to digest. So, and they make a good steak. So, or the same would go for lion's mane. Like if you had, like a pound of lion's mane because you thought, like cooking it like a steak would be a good thing. Then it might give you a stomach ache, while your stomach's trying to cope with, breaking down all of those, chitinous, kind of molecules.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of the mushrooms are very safe, and there aren't any rough edges.
Yeah. What about like fresh mushrooms? Probably a little bit different, I guess, since it's just freshly cooked compared to like extract form.
Yeah, well, again, it's more the digestive process then, and you can feel like full for much longer than you normally would, and then that in some cases that can be uncomfortable. If you overate shiitake, there's things in shiitake that can be challenging on the digestion. So if you heard that shiitake is good for you, and you heard this crazy herbalist in Australia say that a pound of mushrooms a week is probably a good dose, and you might eat a pound of like shiitake on one sitting, then that'd probably give you a pain in the guts as well. But these things are only temporary. Yeah.
Right on. Alrighty, going to the next question here. So next question is, for a male turning 65 soon, what would be the best mushroom to take daily to help with IBS, memory, and energy support?
Okay. Well, I'm with you on that. I was 65 in July. So the best mushroom to take daily so I think if we could just put an S on the end of mushrooms there, I think lion's mane daily would be a really good place to start. And I think the cordyceps militaris for energy support. And there's some good evidence for that with prostate health as well. So with IBS, like I was saying earlier on, perhaps higher doses than what you might use for neurological health. So, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 grams of lion's mane a day. And with cordyceps, anywhere from like 1 to 3 or 4 grams a day, somewhere in there would be like a sweet spot for that.
Yeah. Nice. What about ergothioneine and any other herbs to pair with the mushrooms?
Well, if you're doing the lion's mane, you're getting a little bit of ergothioneine, but for someone 65, I'm doing 2 Ergo Plus capsules a day. When we get older, we start to lose our circulating levels of ergothioneine. So if you take someone's blood, as we get older, there's less in there, and we don't know why that is, whether it's a dietary thing or a transporter thing or what. But the research that we've got access to date tells us that ergothioneine is really helpful at preventing all of the age-related challenges that we're aware of. So cardiovascular challenges, neurological challenges, immunological challenges, and taking some every day would make a lot of sense. So I think at the simplest, just one ergo plus capsule a day is kind of like a really sensible insurance kind of policy that you could take out to prevent future complications.
Mm-hmm. And you had, I think, a while back, when you take ergo, how long does it typically stay in the body, give or take? Is it kind of go through pretty quick? Does it retain a lot pretty good time?
For a water-soluble, biologically active molecule that almost has vitamin status, I think it is essential. It's got a really long half-life. You can take a vitamin B tablet, and 20 minutes later you've got yellow urine, like in the toilet bowl. So those things don't hang around long at all. But ergothionene's got a half-life of a month. So if you took 10 milligrams today, and you could measure it somehow, in a month you'd still have retained 5 milligrams. So when you take 10 milligrams every day, it builds up in your body, and we don't fully understand the pharmacokinetics. So we don't fully understand the interaction that the ergo has with our body. So one of the first places that it gets taken up is in the bloodstream. So in the bloodstream, we've got neutrophils, and they're our main defense. They're the main workhorse of our white blood cells, and they clear up all of the debris, and they're responsible for getting rid of invaders and all that sort of stuff. And they express very high levels of ergothioneine transporters. So one of the first places where ergo gets taken up is in those neutrophils. So that kind of fits into our fall kind of supporting winter challenges kind of theme. So having ergo on a regular basis means that your first line of defense is really good. But then the next layer might be the linings of the blood vessels. So they take a lot up. Then it might be the liver. Then it might be your bone marrow. So if you want to get ergothioneine stores upregulated in more distant parts of your body, you might need to load up all of those places first, so that the ergothionene's like, I can't get into the neutrophil anymore because it's full. I can't get into the endothelial cells in the bloodstream because they're all full. Can't get into the liver, it's full. So I'll go into your brain. I'm kind of making it up as I go along, but and no one's done the research, but I think that makes sense around why we would need to do it, like on a regular basis. And I think in a distant kind of lifestyle as a prehistoric human, mushrooms were a regular and significant part of the diet, but mushrooms are ephemeral and they're seasonal. So the reason for the long half-life in a human and an animal is that in the past, mushrooms were just not around very often. So you would gorge yourself and then you'd stock up your stores. And there's archaeological evidence to support that. So doing 10 milligrams a day just makes a huge amount of sense. I don't understand why more people aren't on board. I'm just not a famous enough voice, to penetrate the consciousness of the masses in the US. We need somebody really famous. We need some kind of pop star maybe, or a famous actor to start talking about the importance of it.
I feel like the ergo movement is, I think, definitely catching on, and there's definitely more awareness and there's a lot more research, I feel like, just beginning to unfold. And it's just gonna be cool to see where this goes for a lot of applications for just health and longevity and stuff like that.
Well, it'll be the biggest thing in the antioxidant world in the next 5 years. I'm confident.
Right on. Alrighty, let's see. I guess we sort of touched on this, but not a bad idea to maybe, if there's a different way, we could kind of approach it. But are there any specific mushrooms that are better for immune support in the fall, winter months compared to spring and summer?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. And as a practitioner, I'm not trained like in the traditional Chinese medicine approach, where there's a greater integration of, seasonality and the shifting kind of environmental patterns. So I don't kind of practice like that. And I think from a mushroom point of view, I think the biggest impact is being regular with them over the course of your life. And we could be talking about, well, fall 24 is on us, but let's be thinking about fall 25 as well. So all the things I'm saying now, for those that are just kind of getting onto the mushroom train, it's 1 year down the track where you might notice the biggest, kind of impacts. Definitely, in terms of the difference between fall and winter and spring and summer, people are typically healthier and in less need during spring and summer. So in terms of taking, herbal remedies and that sort of thing, there's less demand in the spring and summer months because people are healthier. So I guess you could reinterpret this question in terms of, okay, I just got to do the mushrooms all the time. Maybe it's just the dose that changes. So as we're coming into fall, the doses increase. As we're coming into spring and summer, we could back off the doses, for example.
Yeah. Awesome. Good deal. Let's see, go back to the questions here. Let's see, Sarah Adams asks, might be kind of fun. Give this a shot here. Sarah Adams asks, on another note, what mushrooms promote opening the heart chakra? Or is that too hippie trippy?
No, that's not too hippie trippy. Well, in my experience, the most important mushroom for that is the mushrooms that contain psilocybin. And I have engaged in properly managed, conducted, guided journeys with a psychologist in San Francisco. And for me, that was the most significant of all of the heart-opening things I've ever done in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Breath work, is kind of possibly, like up there with that. The breath work or those mushrooms is probably the fastest, most palpable way of getting, to that heart-opening aspects. But in terms of the physiology of it and the mechanics of it, I think that Reishi's got the best evidence in the modern setting, and it's certainly got the traditional background for, the heart, like as an organ, and the cardiovascular as an organ. And quite the opposite, like rather than sweet things driving, the health of the heart, it's the bitter things, which is kind of like the opposite in terms of how we think emotionally. So the bitterer it is, the better it is for the heart. So Reishi, for all of the mechanical aspects of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus, too, I feel like in today's age, we're not eating as much bitter foods compared to like our ancestors, too. And I think that has a lot to do with, I think, some of the health issues a lot of us, I think, are experiencing. Would you agree with that, or what do you?
Oh, totally. Yeah. The food, and it's not just the US, but like everywhere in the Western world, the changes around consuming purchased food, whether it's fast food or eaten at a restaurant or whatever, it's those changes that are significant in terms of like undoing our health. And there's been a break in the traditional, handing over of knowledge, so there's not as much wisdom coming from, grandparents, to young parents. And the advent of, modern, media and social media has made it really complicated to get any aspect around what the truth is. Like everybody's got their angle to push, and just really confusing. But getting back to a more honest, basic, kind of whole food type of diet is really probably one of the more important things you can do.
Yeah. Right on. Awesome. Let's see. Go back to the questions here. Yeah, this is a fun one. What mushroom right now has you the most excited from a clinical research point of view?
It's a trick. I'm a bit fickle like that, so my passions can kind of change depending on what I'm actually working on. But I think the mushroom that's got me most excited at the moment is the yellow or the golden oyster, the Pleurotus citrinopaletus, which is the main producer of ergothioneine. And ergothioneine has got the brightest future, I think, of all of the mushroom compounds at the moment. It's highly novel. It's an evolutionary need that isn't currently being addressed. But the golden oyster mushrooms got a lot of benefits beyond just the ergothioneine. So it has all of the beta glucans that make oyster mushrooms really significantly important from an immunological point of view. So there's discoveries there to be made, and I think there's likely to be other constituents in that golden oyster that make it a better choice over just the pure ergothioneine molecules that many of the supplement companies are choosing to use in their products these days. So I think golden oyster's got a big future.
Yeah. Nice. Awesome. All right, I've got the next question here. Are there any vitamins and minerals that should be kept away from mushrooms?
No. I think, though, that if you're doing the mushrooms with high doses of, with the standardized doses of vitamin D2, then you wouldn't maybe need the same levels of D3, so you could back off, on that. But there aren't any contraindications around the vitamins and minerals in mushrooms. So that's a very kind of safe place to be.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, here, let's see. I think we got a couple more left here. This one asks, what supplements do help reduce insulin resistance and or cholesterol levels?
Oh yeah, the age-old question. I don't know that I got the perfect answer without giving a lecture on this topic. Let's go with cholesterol levels first. Cholesterol is a really vexed topic, and it's a very confused topic. And it's not just the cholesterol molecules. You got the LDL, the HDL, you've got triglycerides, and then you've actually got cholesterol, which is a totally separate molecule to those things. And it's typically the oxidized LDL cholesterol that causes the problems. And reducing the level of oxidative stress in the body can help reduce the level of oxidized LDL. So once the oxidized LDL has been developed in the body, it can actually train tissues to become inflammatory. So there's a certain amount of epigenetic training that can occur, and so dealing with those oxidized particles is a sensible strategy rather than just looking at the outright numbers. All mushrooms, when you get them at the right dose, can help manage the various levels of the various bits and pieces of the cholesterol, because they help to normalize the gastrointestinal environment. They help to normalize bile acids. So you get a natural, kind of correction as much as you can without using anything heavy duty. And, red rice yeast fits into the fungal family, and the statin molecules that are naturally present in red rice yeast are much more effective, than any of the conventional therapies at much lower doses. So you've got that angle as well. But I'm working up to saying that the oxidized LDL is very damaging to tissues that it comes in contact with, particularly the lining of the vascular system. And ergothioneine plays a really important role in protecting against that oxidative stress. So making sure that you've got that 10 milligrams of ergothioneine every day can help mitigate the consequences of having the oxidized LDL. And then cleaning up your diet, reducing your level of inflammation can have a role to play in that. In terms of insulin resistance, it's a really tricky category. It's a really big problem, and I've encountered this new molecule recently called abscisic acid, and that's apt for this fall topic because abscisic acid is a plant hormone, and it's what a plant produces to make the leaves drop off the plant. It also makes ripe fruit drop off the tree. So that's why it's abscission is the technical term for the dropping off of a leaf or a fruit. So abscisic acid is the hormone that causes abscission. So it's been discovered that figs are very high in this molecule, and very recently it's been discovered that humans actually make this molecule in microgram quantities, and it's actually a newly discovered human hormone. So, and the role that it plays in the human body is quite diverse, but one of them is the disposition of glucose from the bloodstream into muscle cells and into fat cells. So we've all been taught, those of us that have, kind of been down this path, that you need insulin to get rid of glucose from your bloodstream. So it's insulin that allows glucose to come into the cells. So without it, you've got high levels of glucose, and if you've got insulin resistance, then the insulin doesn't work and your blood glucose levels stay high. So if you take abscisic acid, it's a way of bypassing the insulin mechanisms for getting glucose out of your bloodstream. So it's counterintuitive, but if you ate one decent sized dried fig per day, you would give your body the abscisic acid that it needs to help dispose of the glucose from the bloodstream into the muscle cells and the fat cells. But so that's a plant-based approach. But I think maitake, any of the mushrooms will help subtly over time regulate those processes. But maitake seems to have the best evidence of a mushroom for helping manage glucose levels. And then in terms of the cholesterol, shiitake, reishi, like all of them play a role in helping manage that.
Yeah. Dang. What about do dates have that molecule in it as well, or is it not present?
I don't know. I'd be sticking with figs because that's where the bulk of the evidence is.
Yeah. Right on. That was awesome. Yeah, that's all the questions we got. Do you have any closing comments, any words of wisdom as we move into the fall dark months ahead?
My words of wisdom seem to always be the same, and that is, like mushrooms are a lifestyle, and many of the supplements that we take are some form of compensation for what we're missing in our lives, and we don't technically really need them. They're just a crutch, to support us living in this crazy modern world and all of the challenges that creates. But there's a deep evolutionary need for mushrooms as part of our regular diet. So we need to consider mushrooms just like we consider plants and animals as food sources. So we need to reimagine, the food chain as mushrooms being not an equal part, but as a significant player in that triangle of foods that we would choose from. So if I could reimagine the food pyramid, it'd be plants, animals, and fungi. So mushrooms, need to be consumed regularly, and it's very hard to eat enough mushrooms to give you all of the benefits. So I recommend eating fresh mushrooms a couple of times a week, and then selecting the various supplements that we've been talking about today that you would do on a very regular basis to compensate for the fact that we just can't eat them enough, just purely out of boredom or practicality, or the fact that we just don't cook our own food as much anymore. So that's my words of wisdom. Like, start taking your mushrooms, recognize their true value as an evolutionary part of our lifestyle, and never stop. Like, get started and never stop.
Yeah. Actually, we got one little last live comment. Just wanted to see what your thoughts were on this one. Yeah, we got last sneaky one. So Becky Scott asks, would you recommend the 5 defenders for a dog who is fighting a valley fever fungal infection as well as Cushing's disease? Any quick ideas on that?
Yeah, that 5 defenders is a good choice, I think. And then with the Cushing's disease, I think, and Rob Silver, my veterinary colleague, would be the most highly qualified to answer this question, but Cordyceps militaris would be the number one choice for Cushing's disease. And I'm not super familiar with the dosages, but depending on how big the dog is, you need less than a human, kind of possibly, and simply just based on the body weight would be a simple way to do it. But there's probably animal dosing charts available to people that are interested in that.
Yep.
Yeah. So good question.
Yeah. Cool. Alrighty. That's I guess that's a wrap. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah.
I think we covered it all.
Yeah. I'm going to go and have a mushroom tea now. I haven't had one yet. I'm craving my 5 defenders.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably create probably a mushroom soup. It sounds good right now. It's pretty chilly on this side of the country, so
it's a perfect time of the year for fall mushroom soups.
Yeah. So, alrighty. Well, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next month. So,
thanks, Matt.
bye.
Great chatting with you.
Lee.
See you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.